I think safe to say that 2 weeks now into Russia's invasion of Ukraine, it has not gone as smoothly and as easily as the Kremlin may have hoped. Broadly, we've seen the Russian military bogged down with logistical problems, their troops being stalled in convoys on roads as they try to lay siege to major Ukrainian cities. At the same time, the Russians have been apparently quite effective in shelling major cities, including, Kyiv and Mariupol. So 2 weeks in, we see a campaign that is not decisively a Russian victory, but seems to be wreaking havoc on the Ukrainian population and on its citizens.
I think it's clear now that they had hoped to decapitate the Ukrainian government to avoid fighting in the cities, to have a lightning strike that would be so intimidating or so effective that Zelensky would surrender or run away.
Суспільство тут, всі ми тут захищаємо нашу незалежність, нашу державу. І так буде й далі.
I think they had visions of Ashraf Ghani running away from Afghanistan in their heads when they planned this invasion, and it would be relatively quick, and that the sanctions would come in response from the West, but the sanctions would be moderate because the war itself would be moderate in nature. That didn't work out at all.
Well, I think from our reporting, what we understand is that Vladimir Putin may have believed, partly because his advisors told him so, that the Russian military assault on Ukraine would be relatively straightforward. Instead, what we're seeing is that they broadly underestimated, I think, the strength of Ukraine's military in resisting the Russian military, but also the degree to which President Zelensky became this global force, really rallying not just world leaders and levying these historic sanctions against Moscow, but his own people, encouraging them to take to the streets, to do everything that they possibly can to resist these Russian invading forces.
Не відступають, не здаються, не зупиняють свого спротиву. Вони кричать окупантам: "Йди додому."
These images of just ordinary Ukrainians dropping their everyday lives and turning themselves into a kind of resistance force, I think it's been something that's galvanized, the world's spirit, arguably, behind doing everything they can to assist the Ukrainians, aid with, public demonstrations of support. That has not translated, however, into the kind of military intervention that President Zelensky of Ukraine wants to see from the West, particularly from NATO member countries. So far, we've seen Western leaders really steadfastly resisting that because they do not want to get their countries pulled into a direct conflict with Russia.
But let me be clear. Our forces are not engaged and will not engage in the conflict with Russian forces in Ukraine.
I think that neither side is going to yield in the short term. Ukraine has fought well. It's created a strong national spirit. I think the country is now very much committed to resistance and to pushing back against the Russians. And I think it's a hard moment for them to yield and come to the table and to compromise. On the Russian side, they have a lot of firepower. They have a lot of firepower that they haven't used. And so there's a temptation, I think, on the Russian side to say, well, if we push harder, either we can get more at the negotiating table or we can topple the government and perhaps get everything. But I think they're starting to yield just a little bit. Both sides know that they're not going to get a complete victory.
Well, I think in the short term, you're going to see more of the Russian shelling and attacks on major cities. This is part of a Russian strategy that, again, we've seen in places before, including Syria, where they try and essentially beat populations into submission and force concessions. I think we have to wonder, though, now, how long that is going to last. That is the harder question, because the Ukrainians have done such a good job of putting up a fight and a defense. For the near term, I think we'll continue to see this Russian strategy of hitting the cities, continuing with these talks, but really not changing their core demands or their insistence, frankly, that Ukraine is not an independent sovereign country.